Ladies, 3 months ago, a complete stranger hugged me on the sidewalk outside my divorce lawyer's office and whispered 4 words that completely changed my 28-year marriage. Forgive him, Nicole. By the end of this story, you'll witness the moment I discovered who this mysterious woman really was and why she knew my deepest, most private pain. You'll see my husband Robert's face when I confronted him with the truth this stranger revealed. You'll hear the conversation that saved our marriage when I thought it was beyond repair. And you'll understand why sometimes the people we think are gone forever are actually the ones watching over us the most. This woman, I'd never seen her before in my life, somehow knew my name, knew I was getting divorced, and knew details about my marriage that I'd never told another living soul. She knew about Robert's secret gambling addiction that had cost us our entire retirement fund. She knew about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering how 28 years of marriage could crumble so completely. But here's what made my blood run cold. She knew about the fight Robert and I had the night before, word for word, including the things we screamed at each other behind our locked bedroom door. How could a stranger know what happened in the privacy of my own home? The moment she whispered those words, "Forgive him, Nicole," I felt this overwhelming wave of warmth, like my grandmother's arms wrapping around me one last time. But when I pulled back to look at her face, to ask who she was and how she knew me, she was already walking away. I called after her, "Wait, please, who are you?" But she just kept walking, disappearing into the crowd of downtown shoppers like she'd never been there at all. I stood there for 10 minutes, scanning faces, looking for that distinctive silver hair, that gentle smile, those knowing eyes. She'd vanished completely. Here's what haunts me the most. As she walked away, I noticed she had the same distinctive limp that Robert's sister Sarah had, the result of a childhood accident that left her right leg slightly shorter. The same limp I'd watched at family gatherings for 15 years before Sarah died in that horrible car crash. The same graceful way of compensating for it that I'd admired in my sister-in-law. But Sarah has been dead for over a decade. I attended her funeral. I held Robert while he sobbed at her graveside. So why did this stranger walk exactly like the woman we buried 15 years ago? What started as the worst day of my life, finally signing divorce papers after months of agonizing, suddenly became something else entirely. Because this woman, whoever she was, didn't just know about my failing marriage. She knew something I didn't. Something that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about Robert, about our family, and about the tragedy that had shaped our last 15 years together. Continue watching to discover the truth that changed everything. My name is Nicole Bearden, and I'm a 4-year-old mother of 2 grown children who thought I had marriage figured out after 28 years with the same man. For nearly 3 decades, I've been the wife who kept our family together, through everything: Robert's job losses during the 2008 recession, my battle with breast cancer 5 years ago, raising 2 teenagers while working full-time as a high school counselor. I'm the woman who organized every family gathering, remembered every anniversary, and believed that love and commitment could overcome any obstacle. I've counseled hundreds of students through their family crises, helped dozens of parents navigate their children's problems, and prided myself on being the kind of woman who never gave up on people I cared about. But ladies, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. You can be an expert at fixing other people's relationships while your own marriage is secretly falling apart. 3 months ago, I discovered that Robert, my husband of 28 years, the father of my children, the man I trusted with my life, had been hiding a gambling addiction that cost us everything. Our retirement savings, gone. The college fund we'd carefully built for our grandchildren, depleted. The house we'd planned to pay off before we turned 60, now facing foreclosure. At 54 years old, I was staring at financial ruin and starting over completely alone. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the lies. Years and years of lies about where he was going, what he was doing, why money kept disappearing from our accounts. The worst part was realizing that the man sleeping next to me every night was a stranger I didn't recognize anymore. I'm sharing this with you because I know I'm not alone. Statistics show that financial infidelity affects 1 in 3 marriages, and women over 50 are filing for divorce at record rates. We're the generation that was taught to stand by our man no matter what, to keep family secrets, to sacrifice our own happiness for the sake of keeping everyone else comfortable. But we're also the generation that's finally saying, enough. I've walked in your shoes if you've ever discovered that your husband isn't who you thought he was. I've felt that gut-wrenching moment when you realize your financial security is an illusion. I've experienced that heartbreak of wondering if you wasted the best years of your life on someone who betrayed your trust. But what happened to me on that sidewalk 3 months ago, that encounter with a stranger who somehow knew my deepest pain, changed everything I thought I knew about forgiveness, about family secrets, and about the power of second chances. Because sometimes the people we think are lost forever are actually the ones trying to save us. The real story begins now. What happened next on that sidewalk will make you question everything you think you know about who's really watching over you in your darkest moments. I'm standing there, outside Harrison and Associates Law Office, clutching my purse so tight, my knuckles are white, trying to process what just happened. The October wind is whipping through downtown, making my eyes water, or maybe that's just the emotions I've been holding back for months. I can still smell her perfume lingering in the air, something floral and familiar, like roses mixed with vanilla. The same scent that used to fill Robert's sister Sarah's house during Sunday dinners 15 years ago. My hands are literally shaking as I replay her words. Forgive him, Nicole. But it wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. With such certainty, such conviction, like she knew something I didn't, like she had information that could change everything. This woman somehow knew about the screaming match Robert and I had just 24 hours earlier. She knew I'd thrown my wedding ring across the bedroom and told him I was done pretending we were still a family. She knew I'd said those exact words I'd never repeated to anyone, not even my best friend Linda. She knew about Robert's Tuesday night business meetings that were actually trips to the Riverboat Casino. She knew about the credit cards he'd hidden from me, the ones maxed out to pay gambling debts. Most shocking of all, she knew I'd been covering for him with our adult children for months, making excuses about why Christmas was going to be simpler this year, why we couldn't help with Emma's wedding expenses like we'd promised. She knew I'd spent the previous weekend sitting in our empty living room. We'd sold most of our furniture to avoid foreclosure, crying over old photo albums, and wondering how I'd become the kind of woman who stays silent about her husband's destruction of their family. But here's the detail that made my blood run cold and changed everything I thought I understood about that encounter. As I'm replaying this conversation in my mind, I suddenly realize she called me Nikki, not Nicole Nikki, the nickname only 3 people in my entire life have ever used regularly: my late mother, my sister Claire, and Robert's sister Sarah. Sarah, who died 15 years ago in a car accident on Highway 64, just outside of town. Sarah, who used to hug me exactly like that, tight and warm and protective whenever I was upset about anything. According to grief counselors, it's common for people to imagine they see deceased loved ones during times of extreme stress. But this wasn't my imagination. Other people on the street saw her too, stepped around us, noticed our interaction. If you've ever had an unexplainable encounter during your worst moments, hit the like button now. You'll understand what happens next. What I did next broke every rule of common sense, but sometimes you have to follow your heart, even when your mind is screaming that it's impossible. Ladies, I know what you're thinking, Nicole. You should have gone straight home, called your therapist, maybe taken one of those anxiety pills your doctor prescribed. But something deep in my gut told me this wasn't over. I canceled my 2 p.m. appointment with my divorce attorney, left my car in that parking meter, and started walking in the direction she'd disappeared. My sensible heels are clicking against the concrete as I'm practically speed-walking through downtown, scanning every face in the crowd. My heart is pounding so hard I can hear it in my ears. The autumn air smells like coffee and car exhaust, mixed with that lingering floral scent that seems to be calling me forward like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. I'm checking every shop window, every restaurant, every bench along Main Street. Part of me feels ridiculous, a 4-year-old woman chasing shadows and fantasies. But another part of me, the part that's been buried under years of being the sensible one, the responsible wife, the peacekeeper, that part is wide awake for the first time in months. And then I see her. Through the window of Rosemary's Cafe, the little place on Oak Street that Sarah used to love, where she'd order their famous cinnamon rolls and complain about Robert's stubbornness for hours. She's sitting in the corner booth, the same booth Sarah always chose because she said it had the best lighting for people, watching. My hands are trembling as I push open that heavy glass door. The cafe smells exactly like it did 15 years ago, coffee beans and fresh pastries, and something warm and comforting that makes you want to stay all afternoon. The little bell above the door chimes, and she looks up. She looks directly at me, and smiles like she's been waiting. I walk over to her table on legs that feel like jelly. Up close, in better light, the resemblance is even more striking. Same gentle brown eyes, same way of tilting her head slightly when she's thinking. Same hands, long fingers with that distinctive scar across the knuckle from when she cut herself making Thanksgiving dinner in 1995. I wondered if you'd follow me, she says, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. Her voice is exactly the same, soft, warm, with just a hint of the southern accent she never completely lost even after living up north for 20 years. I slide into that booth, my mouth dry as cotton, and manage to whisper the question that's been burning in my throat. Sarah, but you're supposed to be. She reaches across the table and takes my hand. Her skin is warm, real, alive, and says 5 words that shattered my understanding of everything. I know. I've been waiting. The story Sarah told me next about why she had to fake her own death will make you understand why some women have no choice but to disappear completely. Nicole, Sarah says, her hands wrapped around a steaming coffee cup like she's trying to warm herself from some deep, internal cold. I need you to listen to everything before you ask questions, okay? Because what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. I nod, unable to speak, watching this woman who's supposed to be buried in Riverside Cemetery explain how she's been living under a different name for 15 years. The cafe suddenly feels too quiet around us. I can hear the espresso machine hissing in the background, the murmur of conversations from other tables, but it all seems muffled, like we're in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. Sarah's voice is steady, but I can see her hands shaking slightly as she talks. That car accident everyone thinks killed me? I staged it, she says, meeting my eyes directly. I had to. My husband Marcus, you remember Marcus, right? He wasn't just controlling Nicole. He was dangerous. The bruises I used to blame on clumsiness, the falls down the stairs, the mysterious injuries I'd show up to family dinners trying to cover with makeup. My heart sinks as pieces start falling into place. All those times Sarah wore long sleeves in summer, the way she'd flinch when Marcus would put his arm around her, how she'd started isolating from family gatherings, always having excuses for why they couldn't come to birthday parties or holidays. The night before that accident, he put me in the hospital. Sarah continues, her voice barely above a whisper. Broken ribs, concussion, internal bleeding. But when the police came, I lied. Again. I told them I fell down the basement stairs. Again. I realized lying there in that hospital bed that he was going to kill me eventually. Not on purpose, maybe, but his rage was escalating. The violence was getting worse. And the scariest part? I'd become so good at covering for him, so skilled at making excuses, that even my own family didn't see what was really happening. She describes driving her car into Morrison Creek at 2 a.m., having planned every detail for weeks. The freezing water rushing in through the open windows, swimming to shore in the darkness, her lungs burning. watching from the woods as the rescue teams searched for her body that was never going to be found. "I've been living in Tennessee under the name Elena Martinez," she says, "and my blood runs cold." Elena, the name from Robert's letters, the woman I thought was his affair. "I got a job as a night nurse at a small hospital, started over completely. New identity, new life, new everything." But then she leans forward, her eyes filling with tears, and says the words that explained everything about my marriage. "But I never stopped watching over Robert. And Nicole, what I saw happening to him after my death." What Sarah revealed next about Robert's guilt and grief will break your heart and explain every destructive choice my husband made for 15 years. "Nicole, you have to understand," Sarah continues, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "Robert blamed himself completely for my death. He thought if he'd been a better brother, if he'd paid more attention, if he'd confronted Marcus about what he suspected was happening to me, I'd still be alive." My coffee has gone cold in my hands as I listen to her describe watching Robert from a distance at her own funeral. How he stood at the graveside for hours after everyone left, sobbing and talking to her headstone, promising he'd be a better man, a better husband, a better father because he couldn't save his sister. "I've been watching him for 15 years, Sarah says, pulling out a worn manila envelope from her purse. "I know it sounds crazy, but I had to make sure he was okay. I'd drive up here once a month, park across from your house, just to see him working in the garden or playing with Emma and Michael when they were younger." She slides photographs across the table, pictures of Robert I've never seen. Him sitting alone on our back porch at midnight, staring into space. Him at my cancer treatment appointments, his face etched with worry. Him at Emma's graduation, forcing a smile but looking haunted. "The gambling started about 6 months after my funeral," Sarah explains, her voice heavy with remorse. "I watched him walk into that casino for the first time, and I knew exactly what was happening. He was trying to punish himself, Nicole. Every bet he lost was another way to hurt himself for failing me. I'm trying to process this information, feeling angry and heartbroken and confused all at once." "But Sarah, why didn't you just tell him you were alive? Why let him carry that guilt for 15 years? Her face crumbles. "Because Marcus was still out there, still looking for me, still dangerous, and because I was a coward, Nicole. I was so damaged, so scared, so broken by what he did to me that I couldn't face coming back to life. It was easier to stay dead. But when I saw you outside that lawyer's office yesterday, yes, I've been watching, making sure you were safe while Robert fell apart. I knew I couldn't let his guilt destroy your marriage too. I couldn't let my cowardice cost you everything." Studies show that unresolved grief can lead to destructive behaviors in 67% of cases, and financial self-sabotage is one of the most common manifestations in men over 50. "Those letters you found? He's been writing to me for years, Nicole. Apologies, updates about your family, promises to be better. He leaves them at my grave every month. I've been collecting them secretly, reading his pain, watching him slowly destroy himself with guilt over something that wasn't his fault." Sarah reaches across and grabs both my hands. "But there's something else you need to know about Robert. Something that changes everything about your decision to divorce him." Silent moment. Nicole staring at Sarah across the cafe table, the weight of 15 years of secrets hanging between them. Ladies, what Sarah told me next changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about forgiveness, and about the man I'd been ready to divorce. Sarah's hands are shaking as she reaches into her purse again, this time pulling out a small, worn notebook. "Nicole, Robert has been attending Gamblers Anonymous for 8 months. Every Tuesday night when you thought he was having those work meetings with his supervisor, he was sitting in a circle at the community center, admitting his addiction, working the 12 steps. My heart stops. Those Tuesday nights I'd been so suspicious about, the ones that made me hire a private investigator, the ones that convinced me he was having an affair, he was getting help. But that's not the secret that changes everything, Sarah continues, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, Robert called the hospital where I work. He tracked me down, Nicole. He knows I'm alive. The cafe seems to spin around me. The conversations at other tables fade into white noise. I can feel my pulse in my temples. Long pause as Nicole processes this information. I'm staring at this woman who's been dead for 15 years, trying to understand what she just said. Robert knows. Robert knows his sister is alive. Robert knows, and he didn't tell me. Sarah opens the notebook and slides it across the table. Inside, in Robert's familiar handwriting, is a letter dated just 1 week ago. Sarah, I know you can't forgive me for not protecting you from Marcus. I know you staged your death because I failed as a brother. But please, I'm begging you, don't let Nicole pay for my mistakes. She's filing for divorce because of what my guilt over losing you has done to our family. I've destroyed everything good in my life trying to punish myself for not saving you. Don't let my failures cost her everything too. She deserves better than a broken man who gambles away their future because he can't live with his guilt. Nicole, Sarah says, tears flowing freely now. Robert called me because he's been clean for 8 months. He's been working to pay back every cent he lost. He liquidated his retirement account, sold his truck, took a second job driving for a delivery service at night. He's been trying to fix this without telling you because he was ashamed. And 3 days ago, he asked me to do something I never thought I'd be brave enough to do. He asked me to come back from the dead to save his marriage. He said losing you would be worse than the guilt he's carried about me for 15 years. Sometimes the greatest love requires the greatest sacrifice. I'm sitting in this cafe, holding a letter from my husband that proves he loves me more than his own shame, staring at a woman who died to save herself and came back to life to save my marriage. The choice that changed everything comes next. Ladies, I wish I could tell you I handled this revelation with grace and dignity, but the truth is, I completely fell apart right there in that cafe. I'm talking ugly crying, the kind where your mascara runs down your cheeks and you can't catch your breath between sobs. I'm clutching Robert's letter to my chest, reading his words over and over. Don't let my failures cost her everything, too. She deserves better than a broken man. This is the man I was ready to walk away from forever just 2 hours ago. The man whose gambling addiction I thought was about selfishness and betrayal. And all this time, he was drowning in guilt over his sister's death, punishing himself in the cruelest way possible. The other cafe patrons are staring now, but I don't care. Sarah slides around to my side of the booth and wraps her arms around me, the same protective hug she gave me on that sidewalk, the same comfort she used to offer during family crises years ago. She smells like that familiar floral perfume, mixed now with the salt of both our tears. I'm so angry at him, I whisper through my sobs. I'm angry at you. I'm angry at myself. How could he carry this alone for 15 years? How could you let him? How could I not see that his gambling wasn't about money, it was about grief? But even as I'm saying these words, something fundamental is shifting inside me. All those nights I lay awake wondering how Robert could be so selfish, so careless with our future, suddenly I'm seeing them differently. He wasn't gambling because he didn't care about losing our money. He was gambling because he thought he deserved to lose everything. Sarah's voice is soft but firm. Nicole, we've both been carrying secrets that were slowly killing the people we love most. I've been dead for 15 years because I was too afraid to live. Robert's been destroying himself because he thought he deserved punishment. And you've been planning to divorce him because you thought his addiction meant he didn't love you enough to stop. I pull back and look at her through my tears. But what if I can't get past this? What if knowing the truth doesn't fix the damage that's already done? We've lost our house, Sarah, our retirement. Our children think their father is irresponsible. How do I forgive 15 years of lies, even if they came from a place of grief? You don't have to forgive him today, Sarah says, taking my hands. but maybe you can forgive him tomorrow. And maybe the day after that, you can start rebuilding together, instead of walking away from a broken man who loves you enough to ask his dead sister to save his marriage. In that moment, I realized something profound. Sometimes loving someone means staying through their worst mistakes, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to see the pain behind their choices. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my kitchen, our kitchen, watching Robert make his famous Sunday morning pancakes for the first time in 2 years. He's humming while he cooks, doing something he hasn't done since before Sarah's death. The foreclosure notice that used to haunt our refrigerator has been replaced by Emma's engagement photos and Michael's graduation announcement. We didn't save our house that was already too far gone, but we found a smaller place, a cozy 2-bedroom that feels more like home than our old 4-bedroom ever did. Robert's been clean for 14 months now. He still goes to his Tuesday night meetings, but now I know where he is, and sometimes I pick him up afterward. The road back wasn't easy, ladies. There were nights when the anger would hit me like a freight train, when I'd rage at him for the years of lies, for the financial devastation, for making me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something was wrong. There were days when I wanted to call that divorce lawyer and finish what I'd started. But there were also moments when I'd catch him staring at Sarah. Yes, Sarah is very much alive and part of our lives again, with such gratitude in his eyes that it would break my heart all over again. Moments when he'd show me the budgeting app he uses to track every penny we spend, or when he'd come home exhausted from his night job but still ask about my day, like it was the most important thing in the world. Sarah moved back to town 3 months ago. Marcus had been arrested for assault in another state. His pattern of abuse finally caught up with him. She's seeing a therapist, working through 15 years of trauma, learning how to live again instead of just surviving. She and Robert are slowly rebuilding their relationship, processing their shared grief, and learning to forgive themselves. Our children know the truth now, all of it. Emma postponed her wedding 6 months so Aunt Sarah could be there to help plan it. Michael drives over every weekend to help Robert with projects around the new house and to listen to stories about the aunt he thought he'd lost forever. But ladies, this isn't the only family secret that's come to light in our family recently. 2 weeks ago, my 5-year-old mother called me with a confession that made Sarah's story seem simple. She said, "Nicole, honey, there's something about your father that I should have told you 40 years ago. And what she revealed about the man I buried 5 years ago has turned my entire understanding of my childhood upside down. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have chosen forgiveness over divorce? Have you ever discovered that someone you thought you knew completely was hiding devastating secrets? Drop a comment below and let me know, because your story might be exactly what another woman needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more real family secrets that changed everything. Trust me, you won't believe what my mother told me next.